Hey everybody, Nathan Duke here. We're back in my library, and this is my first official video about one particular book. And I had a ton of them to choose from. There were a lot of books that I thought were worthy of the very first video in this series. And in the end, I settled on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This book was copyrighted in 1979. This particular book was published by Pocket Books, which is a division of Simon & Schuster. Douglas Adams is a British author. Well, he's dead now. The late, great Douglas Adams was a British author. The Hitchhiker's books are a series. There are several books in the series. They are comedic in nature. They're fun. They're not only fun, they're very, very funny. And I can't even begin to do the humor of these books justice. I'm going to read, I've got my pages marked, I'm going to read a few excerpts, which I think are funny, or just kind of sum up the vibe of certain characters and stuff like that. But really, the only way to do this book justice is to read it yourself. It is, how do we say, it's very English. It's very British in its humor. When a lot of people think of British humor, you get the stuff like Monty Python's Flying Circus. And while the Hitchhiker's books aren't like that, they do have a distinctly British feel to the style of writing, which is not surprising because Douglas Adams was a Brit. He was an extremely well-rounded individual. The book series, the Hitchhiker's book series, started as a radio show, I believe that's the case. Started as a radio show in England on BBC Radio, and then it at one point got turned into a television series with, man, just some of the hokiest special effects you can imagine. It is a sci-fi series. A lot of it is set in outer space, on other planets, and spaceships, stuff like that. And so in the late 70s, early 80s, whenever this TV show came out, the options they had for a very low-budget sci-fi type of show, the budget, I just have to assume, it couldn't have been much, because the special effects are just cheesy as all get out. But the writing in them is brilliant. The characters are brilliant. The humor is fantastic. Basically, it's the story of a man, Arthur Dent. Well, I don't want to give everything away, but I do want to give you enough to go on. So let's just say this. In the first 20 pages of the book, the Earth blows up. The Earth is destroyed by an alien organization trying to build a hyperspace freeway through our corner of the galaxy, and the Earth was in the way, and through bureaucracy and humanity's own backwardness, we don't get the memo, and so the Earth and every living thing on it is destroyed in about 30 seconds. The main character, Arthur Dent, is a human who manages to get off the planet before it's destroyed. In this book, it is not set on Earth. Earth is gone. And in several of the books, Earth is gone. In some of them, Earth is back. And it's wonderful. It's great how Adams manages to invent his own sci-fi universe. And the way he writes gives him an excuse, or the ability, to do anything he wants. The universe that we're introduced to in the Hitchhiker's books is entirely random. It's without any type of rhyme or reason. In the Hitchhiker's books, they manage to prove that God exists, and by so doing, destroy God. So there's no rhyme or reason to the galaxy that anyone can see, but inextricable and bizarre random things happen all the time to the main characters. The characters include Arthur Dent, the human from Earth, his drinking buddy, Ford Prefect, who it turns out is actually an alien from Beetlejuice, and there's Zaphod Beetlebrox. He is the president of the galaxy, or one-time president of the galaxy. I love him. I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, and every now and then you come across a character that you just love. Zaphod Beetlebrox from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books is one of my favorite literary characters of all time. I've never encountered anyone like him in any other book series. He's hilarious without trying to be. I don't know. I love the character. I love all the characters in this book. The next character that is around through most of the other books is also Trillian. Tricia McMillan is her real name, but she is a human from Earth, but she got off Earth a long time ago, before it exploded, and she's dating the president of the galaxy, and she's brilliant. She's maybe the only member of the crew who has a shred of the crew of the spaceship that they're on, who has a shred of common sense. Trillian's great. She's a great character, and she saves the day in one of the other books. If it weren't for Trillian, things would have gone really poorly. Anyway, the book is great. The series is great. There are several books in the series. I was going to go ahead and read a few lines, a few excerpts from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'll give you a little background information on the bit I'm about to read. So, before the Earth is destroyed, Arthur Dent, our hero, or victim, maybe that's a better way to think of him, he wakes up, goes about his day, only to discover that his house is about to be demolished. And eventually he lays down in the mud outside of his house in front of the bulldozers that are going to demolish it, and gets into an argument with a Mr. Proser, who is the unfortunate man who is tasked with getting Arthur out of the way so he can destroy this house. They're having arguments. Arthur's refusing to move, and then then we get to this, where Mr. Proser says, "Mr. Dent," he said. "Hello?" "Yes," said Arthur. "Some factual information for you. Have you any idea how much damage that bulldozer would suffer if I just let it roll straight over you?" "How much?" said Arthur. "None at all," said Mr. Proser. Anyway, there's that. It's interesting how these books play out, because it starts in an extremely human way, and then humanity is removed from the picture, and you're left with the rest of the galaxy, with all its billions upon trillions of citizens. And because Arthur is human, he sees everything through a human lens. And by being forced out of his comfort zone, or his planet, he has to either learn to adapt, which he does very poorly, and make peace with the fact that there is no rhyme or reason to the universe. There's no grand scheme that just holds everything together. It's all random. And eventually in the book series, Arthur does make peace with that. That's in the final book, Mostly Harmless, in the series, which is a very different tone from all the others. All the other books seem to have been written with a great deal of humor and good cheer in mind. Mostly Harmless is very different. At least it is to me. Reading it, it just feels differently. It's a little darker, kind of ends on a bum note, but the rest of the books are just absolutely worth the read. Let's see. Oh, here, I've got a place marked where Zaphod, who has rescued Arthur and Ford Prefect from the vacuum of space in his own spaceship, which he stole from the government he is supposed to be the president of. Anyway, he gets knocked out, and we go here. We go, "Zaphod, wake up!" Hey, come on, wake up. Just let me stick to what I'm good at, yeah? Muttered Zaphod and rolled away from the voice back to sleep. Do you want me to kick you? Said Ford. Would it give you a lot of pleasure? Said Zaphod blearily. No, nor me, so what's the point? Stop bugging me. I read Zaphod in a kind of ridiculous way because he's kind of a ridiculous character. You learn that Zaphod has been tasked with finding out who's really in charge of everything. Because he's the president of the galaxy, but at the end of the day, he has no real power. He's a figurehead, and the more outlandish and ridiculous and often criminal the president is, the more the people like him, because he's a distraction from the real people in the shadows ruling everything. And Zaphod has his own story arc in these books. The books follow Arthur Dent and most of the other characters as well. Ford is always there, Zaphod, Trillian, Fenchurch when she shows up. But Zaphod has his own particular story arc. And he ends up unmasking a conspiracy at the heart of the galaxy we all live in. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a great book. I believe that's Restaurant at the End of the Universe. The books are, let's see if I have them in order. I've got The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Life, the Universe, and Everything, So Long, and Thanks for All the Fish, and Mostly Harmless. The Hitchhiker's books were made... The first book was made into a movie. It was very, very, very loosely based on the book. The movie is very different from the book. It always is. Book snobs everywhere. We all know that. The book is better than the movies. That's true. But an interesting thing about the Hitchhiker series is that every time it was published, and it's been published numerous times over the decades, every time it was published for a long time, each version was a little different than the one that came before it, because Douglas Adams was constantly updating, editing, and rewriting. And so there are copies of these books that, and most of the differences are pretty minute, but there are differences in the story and in the words people say in every published version of these books. I do own a great big thick, it's called The Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide, and it's supposed to be the final word. It's supposed to be Adams' final edit, where he says this is good. Although Douglas Adams died tragically, he wasn't a young man, but he wasn't an old man either. When he died, we were stuck with the Ultimate Guide edition. But it would be interesting to know just if Douglas Adams was still alive and he was rewriting these books, if he would still be changing them to this day, because these books are written in such a random way that it gives Douglas Adams the absolute freedom to do whatever he wants with them. The nature of the universe being random and unpredictable, the same is true for the stories of the people who are stuck in that galaxy. And it makes for really fun reading. It's just absurd. It's just... There's an absolute human element to everything because the main character is a human, and you learn that all of the races that make up the countless people who live in the galaxy, they're all flawed, they're all dumb. The things we think are the worst in humanity are pretty common across most of the galaxy. And the things that are the best, well, you don't really get to see as much of that, because the main characters are constantly getting themselves into trouble, like trouble on a cosmic scale. And they make for fun reading. They're very, very funny. I tried to go through here and find some of the funniest lines, and I was going to read them to you, but without the context of the surrounding story, it's just random, and it's hard to find the humor in the individual jokes written in these books, because the entire book is the joke. I mean, the story, not the book. The book is not a joke. The book is brilliant. But the story, the entire story, is kind of like this absurdist joke that, as the reader, you just get to go along on a ride with. And it's a lot of fun. They're great books. I highly recommend you check them out if you're a fan of humor. If you're a fan of British humor, you absolutely got to check it out. They're just brilliant. Douglas Adams wrote other books like Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, which is also a great book. Absolutely a great book. Douglas Adams, check him out. He's a great author. I don't know where you can find the radio series. I'd have to look that up. But I know it does still exist in theory somewhere out there in the ether. So, yeah, give it a read. Pick it up. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Really good books. With that, I'll leave you, and next time we'll do another book. Alright, thanks guys. See ya.